Hello everyone, welcome back to the shop. Today we're going to be forging a hunting knife out of this piece of 5160 spring steel here. It's a scrap piece I've had laying around the shop for a while. I went ahead and taken it to the grinder and I've ground off the end here. Just the points, it'll help with forging in the tip. So let's go ahead and get this tossed in the forge, get up temperature, and get to work. Alright, so here's where we are so far. I've got the profile ground. I got the locations of the pinholes laid out. I'm going to go ahead and get those punched. We'll get them drilled, get our bevels roughed in, and then get it heat treated. Alright, to drill the pinholes in this handle, I'm using a number 30 bit. I get these from Pop's Knife Supply. They are a perfect fit for an 1/8 of an inch pin stock. And so if you want to have a fit up that doesn't involve having to sand your pin stock and all of that, a number 30 will make a hole that the 1/8 of an inch pin stock will go right into perfectly every time. So let's go ahead and get these holes drilled. Alright, so now that I have the pinholes drilled in the tang of this knife, I also drilled a few little holes. I didn't go all the way through, I just made some divots in there. That'll help lighten the handle a little bit, lighten the overall knife, as well as give a place for the epoxy to set, which helps out with that. So that way I'm not squishing it all out when I put the scales on. But I've already got my height gauge set. That's what this is here. This is a height gauge. For those of you wondering, I got it from Grizzly Supply. Grizzly Industrial. You can also get them off of Amazon fairly cheap. This one was like a $79 one. I think they're like 29 bucks on Amazon for some of them. But I'm going to go ahead and scribe the edge here. I'm also going to scribe the spine, which will give me an area back here as I'm grinding my bevels to kind of keep an eye on, make sure I'm getting everything symmetrical. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get this scribed. Alright, here's where we are so far. Got the filing done up here. Got the sharpening choil right there. So everything's good to get ready to heat treat it. Alright, so here's where we are. Everything in the quench went great. I tempered this for 2 1-hour cycles at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. I went ahead and cleaned up the tang here a little bit, make sure the scales will set nice and flat. And so now it's time to get up here and clean this blade up and get the bevels finished up. I'm debating on whether or not to leave some of the forged scale up here. We'll see how it looks when it's done. If I don't like how it looks, we'll go ahead and grind it off and clean it up. So let's get to work. Alright, so here's where we are right off the grinder. I've just got a ultra fine Scotch-Brite finish on there. I think I like it. I don't think I'm going to hand sand this one. And so, we'll get this file guide off of there. We'll move on to getting the handle squared away. I did decide to go ahead and leave that little bit of forged texture, a little bit of forged scale up there at the top. Not perfectly even on both sides, but I think it'll be alright. Alright, now that we got all of our grinding done on our knife, I'm going to turn our attention here to our handle scales. For that, I'm going to be using these black and gold acrylic handle scales I got off of Etsy. I think I got them for like $12 with shipping. I think it was $17. I've used it before. It turns out really, really nice whenever you get it buffed up and everything. So we're going to turn our attention to that, get these front ends shaped, get the pinholes drilled, and then get it cleaned up on the grinder and get ready for glue up. Let's get after it. Alright, we're all set up to drill our handle scales here, but there's a couple of things I wanted to add that I almost forgot. When you do get these, they come pretty rough. They got a lot of bumps on them from where they cut them with a bandsaw, and so you will have to clean them up and get them nice and flat, which you should do anyway with any handle material. But with this stuff, you definitely want to wear a respirator even if you've got a vacuum system in your shop, because the stuff's pretty nasty and it can make you really sick. Also, these will warp if you get them too hot while grinding them. So make sure that you dunk them in water occasionally just to keep them nice and cool, because if not, you'll be fighting a warp back and forth. It gets to be a real pain in the butt. Another thing is I've got a nice sharp number 30 bit in here. If you remember right from earlier in the video, that's what we use to drill the pinholes in our knife tang with. And I have adjusted my piece of wood that I've got here in the drill press, so I have a nice solid backing to drill through, because this stuff is also prone to chipping. And if you just got a piece of wood or something that you drill a whole bunch and it's got some voids, and you happen to hit one of those voids behind your piece of handle material when you're drilling your holes for your pins, it will chip out around that area. So just take it nice and slow, just be real easy with it, have a nice solid backing, and you should be good to go. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get the drilling. Alright, now that we got our drilling done, I'm going to come in here with my Sharpie. Just going to outline where the tang is. Make sure I got a mark there, which I did because I marked the sides I wanted to put towards the tang. Alright, so let's take these over to the bandsaw and get them cut out. Alright, now we're ready to grind the front ends of our handle scales. But the first thing I want to do is I'm going to use my 1, 2, 3 block here, and I'm going to check and make sure that my table is square with my platen. And the reason for that is because if you don't, and then you just go and take it for granted that it is, and grind it, you're liable to have it canted here, have a bad angle here on the front, not even realize it until you've already got it glued up, and that sucks. So we don't want that. So check it. You can use a speed square, 1, 2, 3 block, pretty much anything that's got a good 90-degree angle on it. That looks good, so I'm going to throw the belt on. We're going to go ahead and get the front ends of these shaped. Alright, so now I'm going to grind an angle on the front end of the handle scales. I just think this gives it a nicer finished look. What I've done is I came in here with a colored pencil, and this is the insides of the handle scales. I've just came in and I've marked a line that I will grind up to. The angle will go like this on each one of these, and so that should give us a nice look. Now when you come back down here to the grinder and you start grinding this in, make sure that the portion that goes towards the tang is facing up. That would seem like a no-brainer, but it's easy to make a mistake when you're just trying to get things done, especially if you're doing a production run or something, or multiple knives, just to come in here, mark it, and not realize that you're grinding it like this versus like this, and then your angle is on the wrong side, and you've in essence to some extent ruined a set of handle scales. I've done that before working on a set, had to reorder the set. It was for a custom order, so it was a big mess. Thank goodness the customer was understanding and was perfectly fine with it. But with that being said, as for the angle that's set up here on my grinder, I just kind of go with what I like. I don't really check it every single time. I have two of these platens. I have a Marico platen and this one. And so this platen, for the most part, I usually tend to keep the angle that I want the front of the handle scales on. So I just tend to go back and I put some Sharpie marks on the inside here so it's easy to find. So just kind of personal preference with that, whatever you think looks good. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get the front ends of these ground. Alright, now I'm going to hand sand the front ends of these handle scales. I'll take them up to about 400 grit, and then we'll go to the buffer and go through a green and a black compound and get them polished up, and then we'll be ready to glue up the knife. And if you're wondering what I'm squirting on there, it's just water. I meant to say earlier that wet sanding these is perfectly fine because they're an artificial material and it won't hurt them. It also keeps the dust down, which makes it a whole lot nicer too. Alright, let's see if we can get that into focus there. Maybe, maybe not. Really like how that turned out. It's important to do this before you glue it up, because once you glue it up you won't be able to get in here and get this actually polished up. I still got to clean up some of the residue that's left over, but I'm pretty happy with that. So just make sure you do this step before you glue your knife up. Alright, we're ready for glue up now. So let's get after it. Alright, I've cleaned up the sides of the handle scales that will set against the tang. I've also used some acetone and cleaned up the tang as well. I've cleaned up my pin stock. I'm going to go ahead and mix some epoxy up and get these handle scales glued on. Now, normally I would be using, right now I'm using some Gorilla Glue epoxy. It's 5-minute epoxy, but normally I get my epoxy from Pop's Knife Supply. I usually go with the mid-cure, about a 15-minute setup. It gives you a lot of time to clean up. It works great whenever you're doing like a hidden tang knife or something like that, that you need extra time on working and cleaning up. So that's what I normally go with, but we're going to use this for this knife. And so we're going to go ahead and get this mixed up. Let's get our camera over here to our knife. Like I was saying, the mid cure, or even the the 15-minute cure, or even the 30-minute cure is good if you're a little slower at doing it. It's probably best if you're just starting out to get something like that, because this can get to be a real pain if you're not familiar with all the steps. Alright, I'm going to put my C-clamps on here. And I'm not going to tighten these down super tight. I'm just going to tighten them down just enough for the epoxy to come out a little bit. We don't want it too tight because we can squish a lot of the epoxy completely out. This will also fill those divots that I put in the tang, those drilled areas whenever we was getting ready to drill the pinholes. Alright, so now I'm going to take some paper towels and some 100% acetone. You can also use fingernail polish remover. And I'm going to clean up the front portions here of the handle scales. And then once it sets up, we'll get it cleaned up on the grinder and we'll have a finished knife. Alright, catch you in a bit. Alright, now we got our handle ready to buff. The sanding process on this was exactly the same as what I did up here on the ends of the handle scales, so I didn't record any of it. You just progressed through the grits up to 600, 800. I think I said 400 on this. That works pretty good too. I did take these up to 800. So with that being said, I'm going to start out with black compound on my buffing wheel. I do have a video dedicated to buffing knife handles here on the channel. You can check it out if you get a chance. But I'll start out with black compound, then I'll change out my wheels to one, then I'll use green compound, and that'll give me the finish that I want. So let's go ahead and get this buffed. Alright, there's how she turned out. Pretty happy with it. I like how these handle scales turned out. I'm glad I left a little bit of forged scale on there. I think it goes well with the rest of the knife. That being said, I appreciate you watching. If you would, hit that sub button down below, ring the notification bell as well if you would, to be kept up to date on my newest content as it posts. And I'll see you on the next one. You all have a good one. Bye-bye.